Well,
Yeah,
hello.
you want me to start with an introduction?
Yeah, introduce
Okay.
yourself.
So my name is Abby McCuen, and I am the advancement director for Savannah Ballet Theatre.
Cool.
Yeah,
Well, we've known each other for a while. I actually just was talking to somebody today, Abby, and I think, as weird as it sounds, we've known each other for a couple of years now.
it's crazy. It's
Time
crazy.
just
Where did it
flies.
go?
I know, since Little Mermaid and all of that.
Yeah.
But I wanted to start kind of even way back because I know in one of the talks that we had, you kind of hinted at this idea of coming into ballet through your mom and
Sure.
just being around her. But can you talk about even some of your earliest memories of ballet?
Yeah. Well, I have two that come to mind. The first is my mom, who's in her 60s, still dances today,
Wow.
and but she's always been very passionate. It's something that she does for her. She loves it, and I think as artists, like you can take a note from that. You don't have to be a millionaire. You just do it because you love it, and I think that we're all in the same boat. But I think one of my earliest memories was as a child, she would drive and take classes wherever she could. And she would I would tag along as a, 3 year old kind of thing. And
Wow.
she'd give me little matchbox cars and I would sit in the doorway and she would take class and play with the matchbox cars. And I think that's really great that, we still work together now. But her passion has always been there. And as even as a toddler, you could see it, you could feel it. And I'm really blessed because she really gave me that passion as well.
Now, was she in shows, Abby?
Well, she was a professional ballerina. She danced with the Savannah Ballet. Um, it was actually called just the Savannah Ballet. We're Savannah Ballet Theatre. We're a different entity, but
Yeah.
it was, it was a huge organization in the 70s here in Savannah. It was, I think a lot of towns were doing this thing where you got a symphony, you got a ballet company, and they built this big auditorium, like the Atlanta Symphony Hall in
Yeah.
Atlanta, kind of an example of that. But we have that here, and they built this big civic center for them to perform. But unfortunately, the company folded, I believe in
Hmm.
85, 86, something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. What brought it back?
But we're a different entity. We haven't had a professional company. We didn't have one from 1985, 6 till about 2012, 12, honestly. So we just kind of brought it back and felt like it was time.
Yeah. Aside from just your experiences of tagging along with your mom, were there any even shows that you can remember, ballet shows that really captured your imagination and kind of drew you into the art form?
Yeah, I have to say I remember going to see my mom perform in Alice in Wonderland,
Uh-huh.
and I mean that's such a classic story that everybody knows. It's really timeless, and I just remember the White Rabbit as a kid. I mean, I was probably 4 or 5 years old, but I
Yeah.
have a very distinct memory of the White Rabbit.
Isn't it interesting like that? I mean, I have similar experiences with Nutcracker, for example. In fact,
Oh wow!
I don't even think I don't even know if at first it was on stage. I think I remember in my second grade class, our teacher had a VHS tape. I
Oh,
think probably of the Barishnikov version,
yeah,
and it's so interesting how this stuff stays with you. But some of those images and even some of the colors stay with me to today. And
yeah,
I think, of course, over time, the nostalgia just builds. And of course, those become fond memories that
sure.
as you just kind of think back about those shows. Were there um, moments like that, or it could be shows or scenes within shows, even outside of Alice in Wonderland, where you just felt the magic of the art form?
Well, I mine is similar to yours. I always danced in the Nutcracker. There was
Mm.
always a Nutcracker. There was one Nutcracker in Savannah at the time, and we all did it. Everybody did it. I met people from every studio across town. We all got together this one time a year, and that was kind of a great building point in my life too. I mean, I still see people who I danced with, and
Yeah.
I think I get jaded as a director because Nutcracker is really hard on us because we're over it by day one. The music is the music, the movement, and the story. We're like, oh God, do we have to do this another year?
Right.
But it was a life-changing thing for me to meet these people and to be a part of a show. And I have to remember that every time when we go into the theater, because I'm like, you know what, there's a little girl or a little boy who's going to come see this show, and who I really hope that they have the same experience.
That's a really good way to look at it. Because I experience the same thing on the art and things that feel tired. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've seen this for so long, but it is fresh for somebody. But I will tell you this, and this is something I'm excited about for our talk today, is that very thing you talked about. Here in a little bit, I want to talk to you about it, how you have, of course you do the Nutcracker, but then you have this fascination with like where ballet not only is or where it's been, but then especially where it could go, and telling all kinds of really unique new stories on stage. That's like, if I could kind of center around sort of a theme that I'd love to talk to you about today, it would be that, because I think you have such an interesting perspective about it, and a way to honor the traditions, but then also to kind of look forward and look ahead to things that haven't been done yet, that can bring sort of a freshness to it,
Right.
So,
yeah, I'm really passionate about that. I think that, like, I feel like I've said this to you 100 times. Ballet is somewhat of a dying art. People, it's a discipline. Kids don't want to sit at the bar. They don't want to put pointe shoes on because it's hard. And there are some who do, but it's very difficult. It's hard. It's a very hard art form. Right. And it's an old art form, not as old as some, as old as theater, for example. But ballet started in like the 1850s, 1860s kind of area, and they're still doing ballets from that time. Well, it was very cool back then, but it's not necessarily relevant now.
Right.
And it's important that we preserve those, much like, doing a production by Shakespeare. Right. It's very similar to that. If I could, that's like a good analogy, but we want to make ballet fun, whether it's a college student or a single mother or a big family full of 8 kids. We want them to come to the show and just enjoy themselves, just kind of suspend reality for an hour or two.
Right.
And it's an uphill battle because you know what I mean? It's right. So we're creating things, we're taking old things, making them new. And I'm really passionate about making art accessible for everybody.
Yeah. We'll put a pin in that. I can't wait. We're going to get right back to that. I wanted to ask you first, kind of going back to your early fascination with ballet, can you kind of chart a little bit of the course for you, or the journey of going from being a kid doing ballet and being interested in it to now doing it full time, really?
Certainly. Yeah. Well, dance wasn't an option. I was going to be in ballet 3-4 nights a week. And, it was hard. I'm sure I was a teenage brat, from hell, I don't want to go, but, my mom and my parents are very old school. Once we started something, we finished it. Right. And I kind of did some other stuff on the side, but I always came back. And, when I went to college, I knew I didn't want to be a dance major. I had a ton of dance experience, but I wanted to do something new. So I stayed in that realm and got a theater degree. And I love theater. I love theater. I love musical theater. I love plays. And there's no reason why the two can't be married, why we can't marry theater and ballet.
Yeah.
There's just no reason. We can do it. And I want to.
And you are. Yeah, you are. And probably will continue to take more steps into that. It's so fun. I mean, you're so good at this, because as you're talking, you're like hinting at little areas that I've got questions about that I can't wait to dive into, but I'm afraid I'm going to get ahead of myself. So, well, actually, you know what, the next thing I wanted to talk about, actually, and maybe this is a good time to talk about, you talked about, bringing Savannah Ballet back up as this new company and this new entity. How would you describe what makes the Savannah Ballet Theatre different or set apart, or is it something in the culture? Like if you had to give the Savannah Ballet a personality,
Right.
like what are some things that come to mind about the culture or the feel around it?
Around specifically our company?
Yeah, your company.
And I apologize if I'm repeating myself. I know we've talked.
No, this is fantastic. Yeah.
But we are storytellers. We are storytellers, and that is the word that comes to mind. And we have these really beautiful ballerinas who join. They're professionals. They've had oodles of experience, and when they come here, I'm like, you're going to be a storyteller. You're not a ballerina. We are telling a story, and I don't like to box our dancers in or our company, because we really can do a great number of things. But I think our personality would be described as new. It's something new, new and fresh. We're trying to keep things fresh around here. So we're constantly striving to keep things different and new.
Right. Well, let's talk about the story ballets idea, because I know that when we did Wizard of Oz and we talked about what you were doing with Wizard of Oz, and I know you described it as an American fairy tale, and you're kind of it's something you've been doing for a while, and I'm just kind of taking some steps into this world that you've started, and then now some of the shows you're starting to repeat and do in different ways. But then I also know, without revealing anything, that there are new stories that you're considering too. But can you talk about the idea of a story ballet, what it is, how you guys like to approach telling a story like that?
Sure. Well, we typically try to pick something that's based off of a book.
Mm-hmm.
Like Wizard of Oz, obviously the movie's huge, but people forget that it was a book first.
Right.
And, but we like to take stories. I usually read the book, like we did Sleepy Hollow last year, and it was just a short story. So I read that. And then I kind of make it my own. I write down how it makes me feel, and I write down what I think about it. And that just kind of transforms into movement. And that's a very similar process for all of our ballets. Like we've done Little Mermaid, and coming up this year, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And so we absolutely stay true to the story. We're not going to deviate or put in our own perspective, or our own storyline or anything like that. We like to stay true to the book. But we like to put our kind of stamp on it. And, but it also, we're trying to pick classics that people know, that people can identify with, and that people want to know more about.
Right. I mean, one of the things I wrote down here is, and I guess this is kind of the ballet in its traditional classical form. I wrote down it's so lyrical and so poetic. And it's really unlike a lot of what we're seeing nowadays in terms of media and entertainment. And I wanted to maybe even touch on, because I've seen you do this in your shows, there's a way that you have the grace and beauty and you fully embrace the art form. But then, and some of it has to do with how you use music, and some of it's the staging, and some of it's the stories themselves. But you've sort of found this marriage of them, and you kind of alluded to musical theater, too, like kind of bringing the two together. Is there, I guess I'm trying to get to my question, like, is there a way that you even sort of approach that? I mean, I guess you did say in a way, I read the stories and then it just kind of unfolds from there. But can you talk a little bit more about your process as you're kind of getting into those stories, and how you kind of bring some of the ballet elements together with some of the more theatrical elements?
Certainly. Well, I'll give you an example. We are doing a ballet about Jack the Ripper in October. And, so I watched a million YouTube videos, because Jack the Ripper is such a famous story. So there's all these like crimeologists, or ripperologists as they call them, who do like videos just like this, where they're just talking about it. I watched a ton of those. I read a book. I haven't watched any movies, because I feel like those get like over fictionalized, So, and I made an outline. I wrote down what I think, scene one, this happens and this happens. This should happen. So that's how I started this process. And then I listened to a million hours of music, and then I can just kind of put it all together. And then, you know, what I do is I pass that on to the choreographer and let them put their idea in it. So it's very much a collective. We're not a one-woman show here. This is a collective process. And I think that works better, because if one person is just putting their ideas in it, it's not fresh and unique. But when you sit down with 3 or 4 great minds and they're all putting in their ideas or their feelings, and that's what we strive to do here for each process. It's a group effort.
Right. And I mean, this is a good place to even start talking a little bit about digital projections, which you've fully embraced as a way to do your backdrops, you know, to basically put people into the world of the show. Can you talk about some of your views about projections and maybe where you see things now and how they have a place in your shows now, but then maybe even hinting toward like what you'd love to see happen in the future?
Sure. With projections?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I fell in love with projections. I saw a summer stock theater company do Beauty and the Beast. And it was that magical scene where the beast turns into the man and all the lights started flickering. And it was something I'd never seen before. It was all done with projection, and there might've been a disco ball. I can't remember.
Right.
But I remember thinking like, holy moly, like this is true magic on stage. Like it isn't just a man behind a curtain and the curtain comes up.
Right.
And it was kind of like all these different technical costumes, lighting, projections, acting, they all came together in this one moment.
Yeah.
And you're killing me. Sorry. My mom's got a plastic bag back there. I'm sorry if you heard that. But anywho, and that was the first time that I saw projections, and I spoke to the director afterwards and I said, you have to tell me how you did that.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I'm going to let you talk to our lighting designer, who, after I met with her, she became our production manager. And then she was like, you have to use projections. And so I reached out and actually found somebody to do the projections. And he was a storyboard artist for a movie company and had no clue how to do it. But he was like, you know, kind of like the situation you said where somebody asked you to do something. And
Right.
And so that's how he did it. And he did a great job. He kind of doesn't do it for fun, or, you know, we kind of parted ways after that because it was something he couldn't do at the time. And then we found you guys, which have been a godsend. And the projections, when people come to see the shows, they don't expect it. And I think that it really gives it that wow factor.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can't tell you how many people during our Little Mermaid were like, oh my God, the sea was moving. Like,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it makes the stage move. It's unbelievable.
Right. Yeah. You know, whenever I think back to that show too, and it was so good for us to come and see it, because we don't always get to do that. We don't always get to, a lot of times we're sending stuff out, and it was so nice to be able to just hop in the car and come down and see that show. And I think it taught us so much. I mean, first of all, I mean, like I've told you several times before, you did such an amazing job of doing just what you've talked about, which is bringing all of those elements together. I mean, Jenny did a phenomenal job with the lighting, and it wasn't just sort of sticking cinema behind the dancers. It was really making the whole thing feel like one piece, you know. But I think one of the things that taught me too, just being able to sit in the audience and look at it, was how sometimes the simplest things actually were the most impactful things. If like there was a little bit of movement, as funny as it sounds, that underwater sequence with just a little bit of that caustic light, you know, just kind of moving, but it was completely underwater. Right. That I think was just as magical, if maybe not more so, than things that had more detail, you know, things like that, because I think it really kind of took its place as a true backdrop, you know, to the story. So we're always flirting with that. And I don't want to get too much on the craft of it and what we're doing, but I remember that taught me a lot, seeing that show and how you all used it, because as artists, we're always on that line of trying to do too much, you know, and lots of detail, and we want to make it pretty. And then we're learning more and more about how to really make it seam into a show so it really can add to and augment what's happening already instead of, sort of pushing everybody out of the way, almost upstaging the story itself.
Oh, sure. It should all work together in one nice little package.
Yeah.
I really, truly believe that.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of work to get there, but when you do, it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Now, looking ahead, and I don't know if there's things that you've heard of, seen out there, are hoping for, and maybe nothing will come to mind, but is there anything, maybe even with projections or even beyond projections, even if it's just the idea of using digital imagery in your shows? Because, of course, we know LED screens are going to come in more. There's lots of ways to project. You can project onto netting and make 3D ghosts. There's all kinds of different things you can do with it. Is there anything that when you see it, I know you spend some time at Disney World too, so you probably have seen some of what's been done out there. Is there anything within the art form that's really kind of got you excited about what could be done down the road?
Wow. Well, I just saw Network on Broadway, the play.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, I've seen a lot of cool stuff. I'm really blessed to have seen a lot of cool stuff. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Wow.
It was, I've never seen the movie, but I know that it's based off of a movie. So it's a play that's based off of a movie that takes place in a television studio.
Right.
So they had, so just imagine, like you're looking at the stage, so it has the back wall and the two walls. They had a screen wrapped around the whole thing, so that it looked like, so everything was on that screen. So if there was something happening, upstage left that you couldn't see in the audience that was happening, there was somebody on stage with a camera that was filming it, so it was on the screen behind you.
Wow.
And, like, that sounds so stupid, but it was so effective.
Interesting.
You felt like it was just two hours of really, really great, interesting way to look at something.
Yeah.
And something that we've really been toying around with, and you can do this more in theater than you can in dance, but the idea of, like, when we walked into the theater, it was 30 minutes before curtain time. There was no curtain. The set was there, and the actors were, like, warming up. Like, Bryan Cranston, who was the lead, they were putting his makeup on stage. So it was like, you already felt like you were part of the show, even 30 minutes before. And I think that was very cool.
Kind of playing with the boundaries of when the story stops and starts, and
yes,
which is super appropriate for that story too. Yeah. The idea of television and reality, and
right. I mean, I don't know much about. I know it came from the West End, but I was just blown away. I couldn't stop talking about it. I was blown away, and so I don't know. Maybe that's the way that theater's going. Maybe you're talking about integrating cameras onto the stage. My mom just showed me something where there was projection on the psych and on the floor. So it was like, it looked like stars and water and the dance. I mean, it just blew my mind. Yeah, I know. Anything that's a surface, people are playing with projecting stuff on it, that's amazing. This is an area where I could obviously talk forever with you, but I do have some other questions for you too. Go ahead. I have to in about 15 minutes. So You got it. Okay. Well, I think you've kind of hinted towards some of this already, but in the process of creating a new show, for you personally, what's the part of it where you feel the most alive? The pre-planning. I like the independence of, I put my kids to bed and I will sit at home on my laptop, and there's no distractions. I write down what I feel, or I listen to what I want to listen to, and to kind of feel what moves me. And that's my favorite part, because I consider myself to be a good team player, and I love working with a team, like a production team. It's my favorite. Because I think you should be the dumbest person in the room. I think you should surround yourself with people who are way smarter than you. And that's not a problem in this industry, or where we are, because I feel like everybody knows way more than I do. And so that's my favorite part. is just kind of doing what I want to do on my terms, and then giving it over to the people and letting them put their perspective on it. So it's like I lay the foundation, and they're building the walls, and they're putting the roof on, and I just feel like it's all a very integral part of the process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like you're one step ahead of me on this, because I was going to ask you, no, this is beautiful, because I was going to ask you to paint a picture for me of kind of your creative process. And that, I mean, I can relate to that. And I think a lot of creative people are by nature night people. And I'm also a parent too. So I understand what that's like when you put the kiddos down. And for me, it's always like a deep,
Yeah, I know.
And then, yeah. And then it's kind of like back into it. And I think that there's something about being creative too. It's hard to find those pockets. And I don't know if you find this, but for me, sometimes the hardest part is just like getting yourself in that position to sit down and to start on something. But it's like 5 minutes in, you just start to feel the flow come in and you get inspired. And it's just really cool to experience that.
Oh yeah.
You know? Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to mention, I mean, and this is really true about you, is you are such a family person and just really warm. And I think you've really brought that. I mean, I've felt that as I've talked to Avery, as I've talked to Shannon, as I've gotten to know some of the different people in the company, you've really brought that familial feel, that community feel, which I think is super unique. I mean, I think that probably for you guys, it feels like kind of in some ways the only thing that you know. But I think when you look out there, and especially, and this is not to put anything down, but sometimes when you look at things in the ballet world, a lot of it can feel like the focus is on the competitive aspects of it, or the perfection of the art form, or things like that. And so I think it's been really refreshing as we've gotten to know each other to see how you've brought that community aspect to the art form. Can you talk a little bit about how, is that something that's just come natural to you because of just who you are? Or is that something that you find yourself kind of diligently having to kind of watch out for on a day-to-day basis with the team?
Sure. Well, I think it's our nature because, like I said, you know, Sue's the artistic director, I'm the advancement director, and she's my mom. And so we are a family, you know, by birth. But, you know, I find that a lot of the dancers who come to be a part of Savannah Ballet, they're 21, 22, 23, that kind of age. And they're just kind of getting their foot in the door. And I think it's our job as artists to mentor them. Yeah. And to let them know that, like, look, you're the only competition that matters. You know, if somebody next to you is doing 4 turns and you can do 3, you know, you're the competition. You be better than yourself. Right. And I tell my dancers that every single time I can talk to them. And, you know, I another thing that rings true to me is, you know, racehorses wear blinders so they can stay focused on what they're doing. Yeah. And I constantly tell them that. And I think that it's kind of built these artists up. Mm-hmm. And as they're feeling confident, they make friendships because they're not a threat. This person's not a threat. They're your friend. Right. And they're also your companion in dance. You're both working towards the same goal. There's no point in tearing each other down. And we work really hard to build a positive, safe place where people can grow as artists. And I know that's something we strive to do. So I'm glad that's really beautiful.
Well, it's beautiful. And I think your approach to telling stories and that being the focus helps tremendously too, because of course the whole team is coming together to tell one story, and whatever is the best thing for the story, as opposed to it being kind of an individual sport. You know,
sure. No, we're a team. We're all a team. There's, you know, I'm a director, but I still want people to be able to come to me and say, look, I've got this really great idea and I don't want to shut them out. I want to listen. I want everybody to have a chance to make art. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Let me see if there's anything, because I know you're limited. How much more time do you have here, Abby?
You're good. I've got about, 6-7 minutes.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
So hard because I feel like I have enough questions here probably for us to have a chat for the day, but I mean, I have to tell you selfishly, a lot of this is for my own learning too. I just love getting to know you and also just learning about ballet. And Yeah. I think probably the most interesting thing that I've written down, two things. I'll pick out two questions.
Okay.
So, I wrote this down. So authors sometimes talk about writing the book that they really need to read.
Right. Interesting. I've never heard that before.
Or that they want to read. It's like there's a void there of a story that needs to be there for them.
Right.
And so then they go and make that thing. Are there any shows, even thinking back to shows that you've done, and maybe you're like me, the most recent thing you're working on isn't always the most interesting thing, but I don't know if there's any shows as you've created them, you've thought of it that way. You're like, gosh, this story, there's something about the story itself and maybe even a personal connection to your journey that it feels like it's more aligned with like a message or a feeling or something that you've needed just as much as anybody else in the audience.
Sure. Well, I'm going to put my producer hat on for a moment because we always wear multiple hats. But, part of our job here is to make money. We have to make money to pay for things. And if you don't understand that, then you're in the wrong business, because at the end of the day, we have bills to pay. And so I'm always thinking about what show is going to put the most butts in seats. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where my thought process starts for that. And then it starts going into, well, what are some shows that people haven't seen before?
Right.
And let me be like personal with you for a second. I love crime. I love true crime. I love Forensic Files, Dateline. Like, my husband thinks there's something like I'm a serial killer or something because I love all this stuff.
Yeah.
But that's why we're doing Jack the Ripper, because everybody knows something about Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
And so as far as it's so interesting to hear like authors say that, because it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
But the Jack the Ripper, I kind of feel like it fits into that because, I think it just brings in like a whole new audience. People will be really excited to see it because they've never seen anything like it before.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Last question for you.
Okay. Lay it on
me. As you think about the next generation, which that could be the Averys and the Shannons, or even your kids,
right.
What are you hopeful that they'll both maybe get from the art form, and then also like where you kind of hope they'll take it, kind of looking as you're thinking about eventually passing some things down or even passing things along right now?
Certainly. Well, I'll tell you as a mother, I think the greatest thing that you can instill in children is confidence. They're confident in everything that they do, whether it's taking a math test or going on an interview or diving off the diving board. Confidence in every step that they take. And, I meet a lot of parents. We have a school associated with our company, and I have a lot of parents who come to me and say, well, I don't want to waste money on classes because my kid's not going to be a ballet dancer.
Yeah.
Well, less than like 1% of our students are.
Right.
But, your child's getting confidence. They're learning discipline. They're learning all these really great things while they're learning ballet. And I think that's the greatest thing to instill in an artist and a child. And my dancers, my children probably won't be dancers. My youngest talks about being a lawyer. And I said, well, you know what? I hope you make enough money to donate to the arts. You have an appreciation for the arts. You don't have to be an artist. You don't have to be a dancer, but you've studied dance and you know how hard it is and you know how much money it takes. Make a donation. And there's something for everybody here, whether it's, volunteering or stitching a button. And so I hate when parents discount their children like that, because you're learning something just by being a cast member of any show.
Right.
So that's that's how I feel. And I think our company members see that too. So they've kind of reached that point where in their maturity where they see that there's something for everybody.
It's beautiful.
Oh, thanks.
Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. This was super fun.